All right, over the weekend, Ubisoft announced a bunch of Assassin's Creed stuff, so I'm a little late on this, but I also just kind of wanted an opportunity to talk about Assassin's Creed and the series, because it looks like we got a pretty good look at the future of it, and it's a series that I have a very complicated history with, but one that I ultimately still love and keep coming back to no matter how many times I get burned. They dumped a lot on us, actually more than I expected, but I still am left with a lot of questions that I want to get into, but let's just break down where the whole thing started, this whole Ubi Forward event. One of the more major announcements, the one that was teased and kind of leaked a week or so back, was Assassin's Creed Mirage. This is coming sometime in 2023, seemingly on the earlier side of 2023, and this is a different kind of spin-off game that's more of a return to Assassin's Creed roots. Now, it's going to take place in Baghdad. You're going to play as Basim, who was from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and there's some interesting implications there, but from what they've been saying, it's very much a linear storytelling, smaller open world adventure game similar to the classic Assassin's Creed games like 1, 2, and 3. And I'm an easy mark, dude. I'm such a sucker that I hear that and I get excited. Now, that being said, there's a lot of caveats to that, right? First and foremost, the fact that they didn't show any gameplay of this thing. And with this game kind of being right around the corner, I thought this presentation would have been the perfect opportunity to show us something. Like, you have us as captive audiences, you have the platform, you're talking about just Assassin's Creed, give me a little taste, because what they're saying sounds great, but I gotta see it to believe it, because I've been burned before. I was very excited that they added social stealth elements back into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and while they weren't terrible, it wasn't enough for me. What they did give us at least is a cinematic CGI trailer, which again is not gameplay, doesn't show us a lot about the game, but does show me a lot of cool things. Traditional assassinating, sneaking around, parkouring away from your pursuers, like all that shit I want to see is there. And at the very least, I guess I can say, like, if this at least hints what the game is like, that seems decent to me, but it's really just interesting that they're doing this in the first place. And with this kind of being, I wish this would be the main approach, but it's going to be this side game. It's been tossed around. This is kind of like an Assassin's Creed Rogue type of deal, which Rogue is super underrated. So if you can't tell, I've played every Assassin's Creed game, and I am of the group of fans that very much prefers the old games, the old style of games. Now, I've jumped into the new big RPGs, and ultimately every time I play one and I go, oh, this was pretty cool, and then by the end, I'm like, oh. But on the other hand, the numbers don't lie, and there are plenty of people that seemingly love the hell out of these new ones, man. I think my favorite of them is still Origins, and that's specifically because of like what it actually did with Assassin's lore, and I really liked Bayek as a character. I thought he was interesting enough where they could have actually given him a whole trilogy, kind of like they did with Ezio, but they didn't. I'm still a little bitter about that. But, that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm very happy to at least be getting something that's a bit of a return to form. I am kind of upset that maybe this might be like a one-off. This isn't necessarily the future of the franchise, unless it pops off, of course. But the other games they have planned in the pipeline that we'll talk about are still that big RPG open world thing. But Mirage, at the very least, if it can scratch that itch for me, because again, it's like very much clickbaiting me into it looking like the original Assassin's Creed, right? Back to the traditional robes, back to a more Middle Eastern-ish style setting, and all that stuff, all that imagery is what entices me. So I can't help but be curious. And I am skeptical, of course, because of Ubisoft having issues recently, from game development to personnel to everything, to me not being happy with some of their games. I hung on for a long time. A lot of people were burnt out on Ubisoft games before me, but now I'm finally there, and this could be the one to really kind of get me back, dude. It's just especially funny to see them finally kind of actually, they had so much going with the whole assassin thing, and then they were trying to actively get away from it. So to see them go back here and actually play to seemingly, like I said, kind of imagery of the original Assassin's Creed is pretty crazy. As someone who's been playing since the original game, someone who was so on that freaking hype train for that first game, it was ridiculous. Like seeing that cinematic trailer and seeing those screenshots in magazines and thinking it looked like the most realistic thing, and then playing it and really enjoying it, but it wasn't like the most compelling thing to play. Like you could tell like there were some parts of it that were a little boring, but still ultimately couldn't help but love the hell out of it just because the finishers were cool. You know, the assassin Altair was cool. The whole setup was dope. The game looked incredible, but of course, you know, for me and for a lot of people, it was really the 1-2 punch. It was when Assassin's Creed 2 came out and really figured out the formula and everything. And that's where things really took off. But that first game, there is still nostalgia for that first game, even though it wasn't the most perfect game ever. So for them to capitalize on that, I hate to say it, I'm kind of interested. Nostalgia sells sometimes, and sometimes it sells for me, and this is an instance where it does. I'll admit it. I don't care. Then, of course, Ubisoft also announced a new mobile game, Assassin's Creed Jade, which is cool because you're going to apparently create your own character, and it's in this like ancient China setting. You know, it looks like you can climb up the Great Wall of China and like jump up, do a leap of faith or something. Cool, whatever, man. I'm not really a mobile player, so I'm probably not going to go hard into that. You know, mobile games, I'm more of like a you must build a boat or a tiny tower guy. Anything bigger than that, I'm not really into. It's also not their first foray into Assassin's Creed Mobile. They've done it before, so you know, I'm curious to see how it goes, but not for me. Hey, now just before I continue, this video is sponsored by Outplayed. This is free game capture software that is really easy to use, but also really unique. Outplayed allows you to run it in the background, and instead of manually recording large chunks of gameplay, it'll automatically record special events and moments in supported games. You know, like have it record kills, assists, points, victories, whatever you choose. And then it's all easily accessible and laid out on a timeline where you can edit and share to stuff like YouTube or Discord or any social media. And everything is just nicely organized by game. It's super easy to use. It supports over 300 games and more games are being added all the time. Consider checking out Outplayed. It's easy. You can download it for free by clicking my link in a description down below. Now, the other big bangers for people are the 2 games announced that are going to continue the whole big, epic, like obnoxiously big open world RPG adventure games. Their next big thing. The first is Codename Red, and this is ancient Japan, feudal Japan, shinobi. All we got was like a teaser of a ninja type character with an Assassin's Creed blade. And for a lot of people, that's all you need to get excited. A lot of people have been asking for this for so long. At this point, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think at this point that ship has sailed. Not to be like the bummer guy here, but with stuff like Ghost of Tsushima, like, I don't know, I really like that game, and I don't know how they can really, especially considering if you think about it, like the fact that they are going for more of this is going to be like a mainline thing with like a big endless open world and shit to do. I actually think that this game, this time period, this type of assassin would do better with more of a linear, straightforward styled, smaller experience game. Make it like Tenchu, you know? Sorry, but that's just me. I still think there's a lot of potential there, and you can't help but be excited for the people that have been begging for this setting for a long time, because, you know, it has been a long time coming, and there is still a lot they can really do with it. And as much as I'm quick to be like, you know, Ghost of Tsushima did it really well, it is good to have something else try and do it differently or try and do it better. The thing that has me the most excited, though, is another one that was kind of teased and rumored just before. It's the codename Assassin's Creed Hex. This is going to take place seemingly in like the witch trial eras in Europe, in the Holy Roman Empire, which is just 100% my shit. Like that just, all we got was just like a little tiny tease of spooky trees and the assassin made out of like ritualistic twigs and shit. Cool, man. Tight. Awesome. To me, it just sounds like a really cool time period to explore something a little different. Source material, subject matter, a little different, and they could really do a lot with it. Not to mention the fact that Clint Hocking is behind it. He's working on this. Clint Hocking, for those of you that don't know, is an old head from Ubisoft who has done some creative things. He's worked on the original Splinter Cell games. He's worked on Far Cry 2, you know, arguably one of the more creative and different Far Cry games. He did also work on Watch Dogs Legion, so there's that. But I hear Clint Hocking, and I've been just like playing and loving and paying attention to games for so long that I do hear his name and I go, oh, that guy, cool. So with him and a team, I'm hoping that they can do something really cool with this. This is what I have my eye on the most, even though, again, we don't know anything about it. They literally just teased the logo. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is, like, I am not a fan of this anymore, like showing me something and then I have to wait like 8 years for it. But I guess this is Ubisoft going once again all in on Assassin's Creed. They know Assassin's Creed is their golden goose, right? So I think what they're trying to do here is just kind of build a whole almost like mythos a narrative of Hype Train. So they have fans like us talking like, okay, we have Red and then we have Hex. And like, so we're like kind of playing into their whole little game here. But you know what I mean? I just think it's like really far off. And I actually would have rather them just kind of stuck around in the rumor mills for a few years before we actually hear or see anything. But now we know what kind of Assassin's Creed games we're going to be playing for quite some time. And, these two, both Red and Hex, are going to be part of Assassin's Creed Infinity. This is their whole big platform online thing that they've spoken about. Now, IGN did have an interview with one of the people leading Assassin's Creed Infinity and the project. And there are more details about it, but it's still kind of vague between that interview and the presentation. Essentially, this is going to serve as like a platform, a hub for Assassin's Creed fans, and seemingly you will be able to fire up this thing and access your games within it. They did also be very clear saying that we could just, if you just want to buy Assassin's Creed Codename Red, like a regular game, you can. That is good for me. I still want that traditional thing, but I've seen this kind of being compared, at least big picture, what we've heard about it so far, to something like the Halo Master Chief Collection, where you're going to access the different games in it. I wouldn't put it past them to try and make like a, subscribe and you have access to every single Assassin's Creed game, because there are a lot. That's ambitious. That's wild. That's also something that personally I'm probably not going to subscribe to. I own most of those games, and I also want to own most of them physically. So not really for me, but they've also spoken about this platform hosting potentially a multiplayer mode similar to the old school multiplayer modes pioneered from the earlier Assassin's Creed 2 games, which those multiplayer modes were incredibly underrated, and they were big for a minute. I actually, like, a lot of YouTubers came out of that. Like, they were making content for those multiplayer modes, which is very cool. But that's interesting if they get that. And then this Infinity, like, this lets you access that multiplayer mode, but it's essentially going to act like this Animus hub. And along with that, they've kind of implied that there's going to be like a narrative through Assassin's Creed Infinity that's going to be like the real world or current time narrative, which actually kind of bums me out. Like, I like them committing to that within whole games, within whole projects. I've also been a huge fan of the whole sci-fi, real current day elements from the beginning, as whack as some of it was. I was actually sad to see it kind of dip for a while. It's come back for sure. I don't know how great it is, but I'm hoping by them like emphasizing and putting a lot of it in this Infinity thing, I hope it can still actually be interesting and keep a good through line. But then there's this whole conversation of like storytelling and product, and how much of this is a new creative way to tell a story, and how much of it is it actually just a product, and now they're trying to take story and shove it into it to fit the mold of it. It's probably that more than the former, but I'm hoping there's more to it. This whole Assassin's Creed Infinity hub, this new platform for the future of Assassin's Creed, because from right now, what they've told us and what we've heard, I still just kind of hear corporate buzzwords and just think it's kind of just a endless games as a service online thing. Even if it doesn't necessarily seem completely one-to-one, that just from what I know right now, I can't help but think cynically about it. This is where I do think that maybe they just shouldn't have talked about it yet, because if there is more to it, if there is something really cool to it, just hang on, tell us or show us later on. But I'm also nobody. I don't know how to make video games. I don't know what if you ask me if I was in charge of Assassin's Creed, I would have had a whole spin-off of pirate games after AC4, and I would have called it Pirates Creed. And we would have just had a shit ton of also awesome pirate games. But that's why I'm not in charge of these things. So I want to hear from you guys down in the comments what you think about all this. I didn't want to just kind of do a news update video with this, because it was all the way on like Saturday. It was over the weekend. I just kind of wanted to talk about how I feel about the franchise, where it's going, how it's kind of losing some of its identity. I've talked about that in previous videos, but I want to know what you think about Mirage and what that's really going to entail. But also, what do you feel about with this whole Assassin's Creed Infinity thing? And within Assassin's Creed Infinity, what are you more interested in? Is it Codename Red or Codename Hex? I hate that we're even talking about officially announced things in project code names. But hey, let me know how you're feeling on this, because there can be some interesting conversation about this with the cynicism, with the optimism. So let me know how you're feeling on this stuff. If you like what I'm doing here, though, I'm just yapping about stuff I love, and I still love Assassin's Creed no matter what. Clicking the like button's all you got to do. It legitimately helps me out, so thank you. But that's it, guys. I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.